chess friends. I'm Grandmaster Gregory Kaidanov with a video about a very popular opening on a beginner and intermediate level called Evans Gambit. This opening was first played by Captain Evans in 1827, so pretty long time ago. Very exciting opening, very popular, probably thousands games were played. You can find those games in database, and if we will count unrecorded games, probably millions of them. The opening starts with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. I would say this is probably the most popular position on the beginners or close to beginners level. A lot of games are continued by knight f6 and knight g5. Players who just start playing chess love this particular system, which is called fried lever's attack. But that's not the topic of our today's video. Much more popular is bishop c5. After a while, after a little bit, bishop c5 is a move which is played. Players who struggle with fried lever's attack eventually realize that bishop c5 is a move which stops knight g5. Knight g5 is now just no good on the basis of queen takes g5. So they start playing bishop c5 first. This is so-called Giuoco Piano, Italian game. However, in openings it happens very often that you start with one opening, then it transposed into another opening, and sometimes even in the third one. So this position is known as Giuoco Piano, but after Captain Evans introduced this move b4, we got so-called Evans Gambit. And that's an opening which we're going to cover today. I would like to warn you right away that I'm not going to overwhelm you with an opening theory. That's not the goal of my video. Since this video is geared toward beginners and intermediate players, my goal is to give you the most practical information, the information which you can use in your own games. There is no point of memorizing 20-something moves lines which will never happen in your games. However, what I would like to do to explain to you the main ideas. After all, you sacrifice the pawn. So what do you sacrifice the pawn for? How are you gonna attack black? And most importantly, I would like to help you to improve your chess in general. So you will learn how to attack, you will learn more things about basic tactical motifs, and just by the way, by learning an opening information, we'll also get exposed to some middle game, important middle game concepts, tactical and positional, both. Alright, so after this short introduction, let's start. Right here, black already has a choice whether he can take a pawn or ignore it. But there is no question in my mind that the vast majority of your opponents will take this pawn. Taking with a knight doesn't make too much sense because it's not even a gambit, which, by the way, literally as a translation from Italian means tripping. So white can, theoretically speaking, take this pawn, though maybe it does make sense to do that, because after this move, you will be exposed to this double attack, and the position will be just too complex to handle. Let's not get into this area. So what you can do, you can just play c3, attacking the knight. Knight will go away, and as you'll see in a minute, you just transpose into the same position as black would take on b4 with the bishop. So let's go back and enter the main line. Black takes with the bishop. Now white plays c3. Now we start seeing one of the main ideas of this pawn sacrifice. White gives up a pawn, but he gains some time. Now, after c3, bishop is under attack. It has to move, and it will allow white, number one, to play d4 and try to get a strong pawn center, plus open a lot of space for his pieces. And white also opens his queen. In a number of lines, the move queen b3, which will build a battery of queen and a bishop attacking the f7 pawn, is also a very important tool of white's attack. Black has a choice here. He has as many as 1, 2, 3, 4 decent bishop's moves. Bishop a5 and bishop c5 will be the moves which you will face the most. Bishop a5 is probably the move which is most popular on all levels. So in this case, after d4, unlike when the bishop is on c5, the bishop is not exposed to an attack. Black normally proceeds with e takes d4, and that's where you're gonna castle, which kind of sacrifices another pawn. The main theoretical line, the Grandmaster's choice, is not to take this pawn, but to play d6. We are going to get back to this line in a short while, but right now, let's take a look at this move. There will be a lot of games where your opponents will proceed this way. It looks very tempting. Black takes a second pawn, and players on beginners and intermediate level love material. They love to grab pawns. However, black is getting behind in development. And if you already know a little bit about chess, you probably also know that developing your pieces at the beginning of the game is the most important thing to do. And since white already castled, he has two pieces out, minor pieces out, and there is a lot of open space, which is extremely important when you have development advantage. So white is going to have a very strong attack on black king. Now let's see how exactly we're going to attack the king. First of all, we're going to play queen b3, the maneuver which I already mentioned a little bit earlier. We are attacking f7 pawn with the queen and the bishop. Black must protect this pawn. There are three options to protect this pawn. One is no good. Knight h6 is usually a really bad move in all similar situations. Here is just plainly bad. You take the knight, and then next move you take this pawn with a check. Two other moves, both look sensible. Queen e7 and queen f6. Here I would like to say something about moving your queen early. When you start learning how to play chess, you know that it's not good to bring your queen early in the game. You should try to develop your knights and bishops first, and only then to bring a queen. However, there are exceptions for every rule, especially in chess, which is a very creative game. In extraordinary situations, you have to use your queen. And here it is extraordinary situation for both white and black. Like white uses his queen because black is behind development, so white needs to play energetically, aggressively. And as a response, black also needs to use his queen because when you're dealing with someone who is attacking you with a hammer, you can't be polite, you need to use some kind of brute force as well. Alright, so the most popular move here is Queen f6. However, first we're going to look at Queen e7. This move was played in a famous game, friendly game, between Bobby Fischer and Rubin Fine. Two brilliant American grandmasters, Bobby Fischer being the most famous one, the only American champion in the history of chess, and Rubin Fine, one of the strongest players in the world in late 1940s. Unfortunately, he left chess too early to become a psychiatrist, but he still left his mark in chess, both theory and history. This is, as far as I know, the only game which they played against each other. At this point, Fine already retired from chess, and it was just a friendly game. Fischer played knight takes c3. Fine answered with knight f6, trying to catch up with development. And now knight d5. You gotta play aggressive in Evans Gambit. If your opponent is going to castle, hide his king, complete his development, you're gonna be down a pawn with no compensation. In this position, white is even down 2 pawns. But right now, black can castle. His queen is under attack. He has to take this knight. Now we take with a pawn. Very interesting moment. We're open the e file. Unfortunately, we can't use it at the moment because this bishop covers e1 square. We can play rook e1. But as you'll see later, it's okay. We will be using this eventually. By the way, in this line, we also see the advantage of having bishop on a5 compared, let's say, to c5. So black knight has to move. And probably relatively best move. Black's position is already bad, but relatively best move is knight e5. Knight d8 will lose in a very instructive way. We're gonna play bishop a3. Black gonna play d6. Now I would recommend you will pause the recording and ask yourself a question: how can white win a piece? White to move, and he can win a piece. Actually, he has probably 2 winning moves. And here is the answer. Queen b5 check. Double attack on the king, which is a check, and attacking the bishop, we're gonna win the bishop. Another move will be rook h2 e1. It will not win a piece, it will win 2 pieces for the rook, because he will take your rook, but then in order to avoid losing a queen, he will have to interpose with a bishop or a knight. So, back to where we stopped. Knight e5. This is a move which was played in the game, and Fischer at this point traded knights. Knight takes e5, queen takes e5, bishop b2, developing with what we call a tempo. When we not only develop a piece, we attack the queen, he still can castle, has to move queen away, queen g5, and we keep pounding on him with h4. So the idea of this move is try to deflect queen from its best square. On g5, queen protects both g7 and e7. G7 is clear, right? It's a pawn. Why e7 is important could be seen from the move queen h6. So queen stays on the g7 pawn, but after queen a3, brilliant move attacking the bishop, bishop will move, rook e1 check. Now finally we see why e7 square is so important. After king d8, queen to e7, black king is getting mated. In the game, Fine took this pawn on h4, Fischer proceeded with bishop takes g7, rook g8, rook e1 check. In the real game, Fine didn't take this rook, but game ended in one move anyway, so let's see what will happen if he would. Bishop takes, rook takes, king to d8. Once again, pause the recording and try to find a move, a brilliant move which ends game right away. Probably there are other moves as well, but the move which Fischer played was very beautiful aesthetically. So he played queen to g3. The idea of this move is so-called deflection. White would like to deflect black queen from this diagonal, and black has to do this. He has to move queen, otherwise he will lose a queen, which by the way probably is a better option. But if he takes white queen, there is a checkmate in one move, bishop f6, game is over. Brilliant game, one of most beautiful games in Evans Gambit, and of course what gives this game extra meaning is it's a game that it was played by a future world champion, and it is the only game between two famous American grandmasters. Now let's go all the way back, and now after we see the drawbacks of queen e7 move, we'll move on to queen f6, which is a much more popular move. Once again, you have to keep pounding him in Evans Gambit. You can't play slow. You have to keep creating threats again and again. Typical idea with the queen on f6 is to play this move e5. It looks like another pawn sacrifice because black can take this pawn with a knight, and if we take the knight, he takes back with a queen. But we don't have to take back. We have this expression in Russian that chess is not checkers. So what it implies about is that in checkers the capture is mandatory, but in chess you don't have to take back. You can keep playing another move. And in this position the move is simple. Rook e1, pinning the knight. The only way to protect the knight is d6, and now you already should know the motif which I introduced just a couple minutes ago. White to move and win the piece, the same way as you've seen a few minutes ago. And the answer is queen b5 check. Once again, attack on the king and we win the bishop. So after e5, the majority of games continue with queen to g6. Now, after a series of very aggressive moves, it's time to win one pawn back. Knight takes c3. We not only we win the pawn back, we also bring our knight into the game. Black is going to play knight g2 e7, developing his piece, and we continue with knight e2, very sophisticated maneuver, which was played by players many years ago. And if black castles, our idea is to play knight f4 to chase this queen. Queen e4 is the only decent square for the queen. For example, if he plays queen h6, we use so-called discovery attack. We move our knight right under attack by two black pawns. But we would love if he takes our knight, because then we take our queen. We open our bishop by playing knight e6. Needless to say, black is in big trouble. He moves the queen, we take the rook with the knight. So that's why queen e4 is probably his best move. Now we continue with bishop d3, attacking the queen again. Queen is running around, only safe square is queen b4. Now we move queen to d1, and there is no safe time for black. Now queen still is in trouble. For example, after d6, nature looking move, white will play rook b1, queen c5, rook b5, only square for the queen is c3, and after bishop b2, queen is finally trapped. White wins. A little bit better move for black is to play knight g6. This way, black opens square to retreat for the queen. But now, with a series of extremely aggressive moves, white will achieve winning position anyway. The rest of the moves which I'm going to show to you would be impossible to memorize. However, during your games, I'm pretty sure you will be able to find those moves or similar moves if you will understand the ideas. So, rook b1, attacking the queen. Queen goes back to e7. Knight d5, attacking the queen again. So let's say queen goes to e6. By the way, if queen goes to d8, we'll continue attacking the queen by playing bishop g5. So that's how you punish an early queen sortie. You keep attacking the queen by your minor pieces, you improve position of your minor pieces, you gain time by doing that. So black plays queen e6. Now comes quite sophisticated move, rook to b5. The idea of this move is to remove the defender. We're going to take on a5 to remove this bishop which protects the c7 pawn, and then knight takes e7 will put queen and rook under so-called fork. So black can play rook b8, avoiding a fork. Now we change our plan. We'll no longer need to take this bishop. We play bishop a3, hitting the rook on f8. Another aggressive move. Every move we create a threat. That's a way to play Evans Gambit. Black probably will play d6, trying to block this attack. Takes, takes. How else now can we attack the queen? If your answer is rook e1, sorry, you forgot about this bishop. This bishop controls the square. Cannot do right now. But we have a better move. Knight g5. Black queen has to go away, and next, super aggressive move, threatening checkmate. How can we threaten him a checkmate? Queen h5. We are threatening checkmate on h7. He has no choice but to play h6. Next theme of middle game theme of similar positions. Open the opponent's king. And when you do that, a lot of times you sacrifice material. Right now, king looks relatively safe. He has all those pawns fence in front of them. So we need to remove those pawns to open the king. And sometimes to sacrifice material is okay. And in this position, we are going to sacrifice lots of material. First, we give up a knight. Knight f6 check. Fork on a king and a queen. He has to take. We take the pawn, threatening checkmate. He has to take on g5. Now we threatening checkmate in one move again. Bishop b2, threatening queen g7. He has to block it. And here comes next sacrifice. Rook takes e5. Rook is better than knight. We know that. Rook is 5 points, knight is 3 points. But if we want to give a checkmate, who cares? So, and we are very close. He takes with a pawn. We play bishop takes e5, threatening checkmate again. If he plays knight takes e5, can you see the checkmate in one? Too easy. Queen h7. So, he will stop the checkmate by playing f6. Pretty much the only way to do it. Now, check. Rook f7, only move. Queen takes g7. Check. King f8. Another deflection. We would love to take this rook with a checkmate, but black queen protects it. So, bishop d6, check. Can't take it, because if he does, we will take the rook with a checkmate. Only move is king e8, and finally checkmate in 2. Check, only legal move, checkmate. So, like I said, this is 31 moves. There is no way you can remember that. But, if you remember the ideas I presented in this game, you will win a lot of games. Not only in Evans Gambit, in other openings. But the ideas are, when you have development advantage, when your opponent's pieces are not developed yet and his king is in danger, you have to play aggressively and sometimes sacrifice, open the opponent's king in order to checkmate it. All right, now let's go all the way back and we look at some other moves for black. As I mentioned earlier, after bishop a5, d4, e takes d4, castles, the most popular on grandmaster level at least is the defense, which starts with d6, c takes d4, and bishop b6. By the way, two of those moves could be played in the different order. My guess is that you will not see this defense too often on your level, but just in case, I'll show you some ideas how to play against it. So knight c3, which is developing our pieces. If he plays knight g7, which is a bad move, then a very typical idea: knight g5, castles, queen h5. We're threatening h7, we are threatening f7. Game is going to be decided just in few moves. So this is very typical idea when knight is on e7. By the way, few moves ago I mentioned that it's always bad for black to play knight h6. But if you play a premature attack here, knight g5, then knight h6 is actually a fine move. This white knight shields black knight from the attack by bishop on c1, and black is defending against f7 attack. So that's why we would like to see where this knight is going before starting attack. Knight g5 would be one of those premature attacks. We would like to bring more our pieces into the game before we start attack in this particular case. So after knight c3, one of the most natural moves will be to bring knight to f6. And here comes another very popular Evans Gambit idea. e5, d takes e5, and now all of a sudden bishop a3. We're not going to take this pawn back. We're going to develop our bishop and stop black king from castle. Castling is illegal now. He's going through attacking square. Bishop on a3 controls the square. And now look at both our bishop. They control a lot of important squares. Here is just one example of one game, how the game can proceed. So let's say he takes this pawn. Queen b3. Familiar idea, trying to win this pawn. Let's say he plays queen d7. Now all our minor pieces are in the game. Now it's time to bring rooks in the game. Rook a2 e1. The reason why we move this rook, we try to avoid the pen. He plays knight a5. Now, though our queen is under attack, we're not going to move it away. We continue attacking ourselves. Knight takes e5, counter-attacking his queen. He takes our queen. And now, surprisingly, we are not going to take his queen. We are playing amazing move here. Pause the recording if you would like to test yourself whether you can find this great move. And the move is knight takes f7, check. Another discovery check from the rook. He has no choice but to give his queen back anyway, and after bishop takes, knight takes rook, white ends up with a lot of extra material. Another example of how to attack king in the center. Let's go back and now when we back to the position in which black played knight f6, now let's take a look at the main move in this position, bishop to g4. Here the solution is our next move is not so obvious. Black's position is getting better, and he's planning to castle queenside. So we have to find some kind of new idea. Queen b3 will no longer be so strong, because after something like queen to d7, he is fine. So now we come up with a new idea, which is good only when this bishop is on b6. We play bishop b5. The idea is to play d5 and win this penned knight. His knight is penned by our bishop. Black most likely will play first bishop takes f3. Now question, should we take with the queen or should we take with the pawn? Unfortunately, queen takes, which is good in most similar situations, is not good here, because we're gonna lose very important pawn on d4. Can't do that. So we have to take with the pawn. Many beginner players, or even intermediate players, hate to play this move because you open your king, and they are right. In majority of cases, this move is bad. But being a creative game, chess very often puts you into kind of difficult situation when you have to make a move, which in majority of cases is bad. But in this particular situation, you have to play it, and it's good because you still have this threat of d5. So let's say he plays a6, you move bishop to a4, and now he plays bishop to a5. Just by the way, I would like to note that taking this pawn with the bishop is bad because you simply win the bishop. You take the knight, check, remove the defender, and now you can take the bishop. White is up, the bishop, he should be winning. So let's say black plays bishop a5. It's a very tricky move, which has two ideas in it. So number one, he attacks the knight, and number two, if we play d5, for example, of course he's going to take the knight. But just in case, as a general idea, you can defend against this by attacking our bishop. And so breaking the pen, saving the knight. So here we come up with a very interesting idea. We take the knight, pawn takes, queen a4, double attack on the bishop and on the pawn on c6. Black will have to take, then we'll play queen takes c6 check, king has to move away, and we take on c3. So we won the material back, the material is even, and he can't castle anymore. We have a strong pawn center. White has a huge initiative here. Let's just go for a few more moves to show how the game can continue. Knight e7, rook b1, rook on the open file, one of the major chess concepts in the middle game. Black will probably move his knight away. White will play d5, opening the diagonal. Let's say black plays f6, trying to close this diagonal and maybe move his king up so that he can develop his rook. No break for black. Rook b7, attacking the pawn on c7. He has to play something like rook to c8, bishop d2. We develop the bishop, we prepare the rook maneuver. Now why d2 becomes clear from the next move. If he plays knight h4, attacking our pawn, we don't care, it's protected by the queen. So we continue with the rook c1. Let's say he plays queen d7, too early to win this pawn. We can, but after all exchanges, this pawn is gonna go. So we just move king away, king f1, he plays queen h3 check, king e2, king is safe on e2. Let's say he plays king j8. Once again, don't take this pawn prematurely, because then eventually you're gonna lose this pawn. Just play bishop f4, take your time. Now it's a moment to take time. He's playing down a rook. Rook is not in the game. Next move is bishop g3, defending against black threat. And eventually, after rook takes c7, all those pawns c7, d6 will be gone. We'll have a decisive advantage. So far, I covered the main responses for black. More to come in my future videos. We need to look at some rare lines and also look at possibilities when black declines the Evans Gambit. But so far, I think you've got lots of information. Probably will take some time to digest it. Hopefully you liked what I showed to you today. Hopefully you will employ this opening in your games, and hopefully it will bring you lots of brilliant victories. Go Evans Gambit! I'm Grandmaster Gregory Kaidanov. Goodbye.